News, I'm Bakhtiar Sanova, and let's take a look at today's top stories. Lebanon casts doubt on Donald Trump's claim of upcoming talks with Israel. Wave of Russian drone and missile attacks kill at least 16 people in Ukraine. And Pope Leo XIV visits Cameroon with a message of peace amid attacks from Donald Trump. Lebanon is not aware of planned talks with Israel. An official source has said, following an announcement by U.S. President Donald Trump, that leaders of Israel and Lebanon will speak later.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that the leaders of Israel and Lebanon will speak to each other for the first time in 34 years on Thursday. In a post on his Truth Social platform, Trump said the aim is to create what he called a little breathing room between the two sides. However, Lebanon denies Trump's claims on talks with Israel. According to two Lebanese official sources, there is no information about a reported call between Lebanon's presidency and Israel. The announcements follows a meeting on Tuesday at the State Department between Lebanese Ambassador Nada Hamadeh and Israeli Ambassador Yechiel Leiter, hosted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The United Nations welcomes the talks between Lebanese and Israeli representatives held on Tuesday, describing the dialogue as an important first step toward breaking the cycle of violence and ending hostilities. Trump's claims accepted as his desire to end Israel-Lebanon conflict.
The White House has signaled behind the scenes that President Trump wants to see the end of hostilities between Israel and Lebanon, where clashes between Israeli forces and Iranian-backed Hezbollah continue. While the U.S.-Iranian negotiations are technically separate from the Israeli-Lebanon talks, officials in Washington believe that an end to the fighting in Lebanon could help in efforts to reach a deal with Iran.
The diplomatic push comes as hostilities continue on the ground. The Israeli army on Thursday urged residents in southern Lebanon to evacuate areas south of the Zerani River, citing ongoing military operations against Hezbollah. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, Israeli attacks on Lebanon have killed over 2,000 people since the latest conflict began.
U.S. President Donald Trump has said it's very possible the United States could reach a peace deal with Iran before King Charles III's visit later this month. Talks between Washington and Tehran continue, with officials reporting progress toward a possible framework agreement. Although major differences remain, the White House says discussions on further negotiations are ongoing, with no date yet set for the next meeting. Iran reports that talks are continuing through Pakistani mediation and insists the United States must prove its sincerity, while adding it's open to discussing uranium enrichment, but maintains its right to nuclear energy. Ukraine is reeling after a wave of overnight strikes hit several major cities. At least 16 people were killed and dozens injured.
Russia has launched one of its deadliest attacks on Ukraine this year, killing at least 16 people and injuring dozens in overnight missile and drone strikes across multiple cities. The assault hit the capital Kyiv, as well as Dnipro and the southern port city of Odessa, damaging residential buildings and critical infrastructure. In Kyiv, at least 4 people, including a 12-year-old child, were killed while dozens were wounded. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said several of the injured, including emergency workers, were taken to hospital. Rescue teams also pulled a mother and child from the rubble of a heavily damaged apartment block.
It's just scary, that's all. I fear for our country and for everything we have. I feel so sorry for the children. So many people died today. Children died. It's so sad.
Elsewhere, at least 9 people were killed in Odessa and 2 in Dnipro, where strikes set residential buildings on fire. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched a large-scale barrage of ballistic and cruise missiles, along with hundreds of drones. While many were intercepted, several hit residential areas, causing widespread destruction. Meanwhile, Russian authorities say Ukrainian drone attacks killed 2 children and damaged homes and facilities in Russia's Krasnodar region. The attack comes as Ukraine faces a critical shortage of air defense systems, particularly US-made Patriot missiles used to intercept ballistic threats. President Volodymyr Zelensky says the situation is at its worst. The latest violence follows a brief Easter ceasefire, with both sides accusing each other of violations. Efforts to negotiate an end to the war remain stalled, with Kyiv calling for a full ceasefire, while Moscow insists on broader peace terms first.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been honored at the International Four Freedoms Award ceremony in Middelburg for his leadership and Ukraine's resilience during the ongoing war. The award, presented by the Roosevelt Foundation in the Netherlands, honors contributions of freedom of speech, worship, want and fear. During the ceremony, he urged international partners to maintain pressure on Russia. He also called for the timely delivery of all promised aid to Ukraine. The UK's economic outlook has worsened, with fresh forecasts signaling slower growth, rising inflation and mounting strain on households. A-News' Zeynep Farizadeh reports from Manchester.
Britain's economic outlook has taken a significant hit, with the International Monetary Fund delivering the sharpest downgrade among major advanced economies. The IMF now expects the UK economy to grow by just 0.8% in 2026, down from a previous forecast of 1.3%, placing Britain at the bottom of the G7 when measured per person. The downgrade is being driven largely by the ongoing conflict involving Iran, which has pushed up global energy prices. The IMF says that the war initially doubled the natural gas costs, a major issue for the UK, which remains heavily reliant on inputs. The surges in energy prices is also expected to delay interest rate cuts from the Bank of England, keeping borrowing costs higher for longer and adding further pressure on households and businesses. UK Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves has criticized the United States' handling of the conflict, describing the lack of a clear strategy as a folly and warning that the consequences are being felt globally, including by families across Britain. At the same time, unemployment is expected to rise, with the IMF forecasting a rate of 5.6% this year. Inflation, which has already been persistently high in the UK, is now projected to peak at around 4% in 2026, higher than previously expected, before gradually easing back to the Bank of England's 2% target by the end of 2027. Economists warn the figures highlight a deeper issue: the UK's vulnerability to global shocks, particularly due to its dependence on fossil fuels. The government says it is now considering targeted support for households and businesses struggling with rising energy costs. But analysts say balancing that support with already stretched public finances will be a major challenge in the months ahead. Zeynep Farizadeh, A-News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Pope Leo XIV is continuing his Africa tour with a strong message on peace. He arrived in the mineral-rich country of Cameroon and was greeted by tens of thousands who lined the streets to welcome his visit, while also delivering a speech on combating corruption.
Pope Leo XIV has arrived in Cameroon, pressing ahead with a message of peace and justice despite sharp criticism from Donald Trump. Trump has repeatedly criticised the Pope during his Africa tour over his views on global conflicts and social issues. In response, the pontiff did not name him directly, but stressed the need for dialogue, saying people can live together in peace despite their differences. Speaking in the capital Yaoundé, he urged leaders to take a bold leap forward and warned that corruption undermines trust in authority. Addressing Paul Biya, the president of Cameroon, he said the chains of corruption must be broken for justice to prevail.
Hearts must be set free from an idolatrous thirst for profit. True profit comes from integral human development. That is, the balanced growth of all the aspects that make life on this earth a blessing.
He also called for an end to violence in Cameroon's English-speaking regions, where a separatist conflict has claimed thousands of lives. During his three-day visit, he is expected to travel to Bamenda for a peace meeting, with armed groups announcing a temporary pause in fighting. Crowds gathered in Yaoundé to welcome the Pope, singing and dancing in scenes reflecting hope for change and unity. The Cameroon leg is part of a broader 10-day Africa tour that includes Angola and Equatorial Guinea. A major mass is expected in Douala, where large crowds are anticipated. Before arriving in Cameroon, Pope Leo visited Algeria, where he promoted interfaith dialogue and peaceful coexistence. In Annaba, he highlighted the teachings of St. Augustine of Hippo, urging unity across religions. Throughout the trip, the Pope has maintained a consistent message. Peace, respect and justice must prevail over division, regardless of political pressure.
The U.S. Senate has rejected two resolutions aimed at blocking nearly $500 million in proposed arms sales to Israel. The measures were introduced by Senator Bernie Sanders and sought to stop the transfer of bombs and armored bulldozers to the Israeli government. In votes held on Wednesday, the Senate opposed both efforts. Lawmakers voted 42-59 against the motion to block a $295 million sale of armored bulldozers. A second resolution to block the sale of 1,000-pound bombs was also rejected. Malaysia is moving to strengthen energy ties with Australia as both countries respond to supply disruptions linked to the Middle East conflict. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim said state energy firm Petronas will prioritize supplying Australia with excess fuel, following talks with his counterpart Anthony Albanese. The visit comes as Canberra looks to secure food and energy supplies across Southeast Asia. Australia, a key supplier of natural gas to Malaysia, has also pledged to honor existing contracts despite ongoing disruptions.
Malaysia and Australia share strong interdependence in energy resources, including fuel and LNG. We have existing agreements, and today we reaffirmed our commitment to them. We also signed a joint statement on energy security, reflecting our commitment to stable and resilient energy supplies. I did express our concern on the issue of diesel because our supply is inadequate in the medium term. But in terms of fuel, we have obtained an assurance from Petronas that once the domestic requirements are met, there is clearly some excess. And we given an assurance that the priority will be to Australia.
Australian resources help to power our region, and our farmers help to feed the region. Nearly 60% of Malaysia's wheat and 75% of its lamb and beef come from Australia. And our neighbours know that providing fuel and fertiliser to Australia helps put food on the table in this region.
Hundreds are feared missing after a boat carrying Rohingya refugees sank in the Andaman Sea. The United Nations and migration agencies say the vessel was overcrowded and went down in rough seas during its journey towards Malaysia.
A trafficking boat carrying hundreds of Rohingya refugees has capsized in the Andaman Sea, leaving around 250 people missing and feared dead. The vessel left Teknaf in southern Bangladesh earlier this month, bound for Malaysia. UN agencies say it sank in the second week of April, amid rough seas, strong winds and severe overcrowding. Survivors say the journey was already deadly before the boat went down. Mohammed Rafiq, one of the few rescued, said traffickers forced passengers into sealed compartments meant for fish storage, trying to avoid patrols.
When we reached the Andaman Sea, we were asking for water and they closed the hatches of our compartment. We were suffocating, screaming for oxygen. There were 30 to 40 people in each compartment. Around 33 people died by suffocation. The traffickers told us that there were 240 men, 20 women in the boat as we kept asking about overloading. We saw 13 traffickers. Before the boat capsized, I fainted when the boat was caught in a storm, and hot fuel poured on my body. I started screaming in pain, and then I lost consciousness. The next afternoon, an oil tanker rescued us. They picked up 5 of us.
Most were never found. The tragedy underscores the risks Rohingya refugees continue to take, attempting dangerous sea crossings in search of safety or reunion with family. Umatara holds her daughter's UN identification card, searching for answers that have not come. Her daughter, Umi Habiba, had set out to join her husband in Malaysia.
I heard that a boat had capsized. People are saying that their relatives have reached or returned safely, but I didn't get any updates on my daughter. I can't stand it anymore. I have a grandson. I am suspecting the worst. The boat has capsized and there is no update on my daughter. It all sums up that my daughter probably died on that boat.
Now across the camps, many families holding on to hope, waiting for answers and fearing the worst as the fate of their loved ones remains unknown.
One of the last 2 refineries in Australia, Viva in Geelong City, caught on the fire overnight, slashing petrol production at the facility and sparking price and supply concerns.
A major fire has broken out overnight at Viva Energy's oil refinery in Geelong on Wednesday. The blaze began late that evening at the facility, about an hour from Melbourne, one of Australia's last 2 operational refineries. The incident comes amid growing concerns about global fuel supply, after Iran moved to effectively close the Strait of Hormuz, following recent attacks by the United States and Israel. The fire, believed to have been caused by equipment failure, engulfed 2 units of the plant, which supplies more than half of Victoria's fuel needs. There are no reports of casualties.
Whilst the fire is not yet under control, the fire has been contained to the Mogas plant and to an area of approximately 30 metres by 30 metres, and also through some platform and infrastructure areas. Large quantities of water has been used to cool and contain the fire, and that will continue to happen all day. Isolation valves have been activated to isolate as much as the plant as possible.
Australian Energy Minister Chris Bowen stated that the situation would primarily affect gasoline production.
It will have an impact, but at this point, production of diesel and jet fuel does continue, and no reason to believe at this point that there's need to stop that. The impact on petrol production, I'm sure petrol production will continue, but it may be impacted for some time, obviously.
The Geelong refinery can process up to 120,000 barrels of oil per day and employs more than 1,100 people. It supplies over 50% of Victoria's fuel and around 10% of Australia's total fuel demand. Authorities say the situation remains under close watch, with the full impact on fuel supply and refinery operations expected to become clearer in the coming days.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Middle East tensions and a possible Iran breakthrough. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. So let's continue our coverage with more in-depth analysis. Tensions in the Middle East may be nearing a turning point. Donald Trump says the war with Iran could be close to ending, with amazing developments expected within days, while back-channel diplomacy reportedly involving Pakistan signals a possible breakthrough on Iran's nuclear file. At the same time, Israel is weighing a temporary ceasefire in Lebanon under growing international pressure, as clashes with Hezbollah risk widening the conflict. To unpack these fast-moving developments, I'm joined by Enrique Casero, political analyst who speaks to us from Madrid, Spain. Mr. Casero, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Casero, let me start with Trump's remarks. How credible is the claim that the war with Iran could be nearing an end?
If I have to express this in some sort of percentage, I will say 20%, but we have to consider that Donald Trump has been saying things like that all the time, in every conflict, in every moment, trying to
to place a truce. So at the end, at some point, something happens that he can consider the point or the reach as valid. But right now, I think there is a lot of things to talk about for only believing that the solution is going to be close to this very moment.
So what do we know about Pakistan's role as a mediator between Washington and Tehran?
That his name is Munir, which is who is a very high-ranked military in the Pakistani Army Force, and that he is in Tehran right now. Probably he is going to be the. Pakistan is doing this because Pakistan got a lot of things to win if they can mediate for reaching an agreement. I think that Mr. Munir, General Munir, is Marshal Munir, in fact, is a very talented and a very clever guy, a person who knows the different approaches, and he's very aware of what the United States wants, and especially what Israel wants, and what Iran is able or is prone to give in order to reach a truce or just a ceasefire or unblocking the Hormuz Strait. Whatever the solution is going to be, I think is not going to be the last one. I think it's going to be but I think it's going to be a very good intermediate one.
Mr. Casero, could this reported breakthrough on Iran's nuclear program be substantive, or is it a premature optimism?
I think it's premature optimism. Mohammad Islami, who's the main authority in nuclear energy in the country, has said that this is whatever the United States wants to reach is really, really far from being a reality in a short term. Right now, I remember, if I remember right, the United States is asking for 20 years inactivity and nuclear plants and removing all the nuclear material that Iran could hold in its territory. And on the other side, Iran is asking for 3 to 5 years of no nuclear activity. So we can see that the difference are huge, and the agent, the actor who has to say the last word in here, which I think is Israel, has said nothing right yet. So I think it's very, very, very premature.
So do you see internal divisions in Washington shaping the pace of diplomacy with Iran?
I see internal divisions. Probably, I think that within the cabinet is J.D. Vance probably is the most outspoken agent, the most outspoken character, saying that this war has no sense. Probably J.D. Vance never pictured the thing as a nonsense, but whatever. He's completely contrary to the intervention, and the Senate is right now. The Republicans in the Senate, which has rejected recently the declaration of war for they've been blocking Donald Trump as much as they can. The Republicans are working and are arguing with the fact that the president only got a 60 days period, which is going to be finished next May the 1st, a 60-day period, and probably he has to prove unavoidable military circumstances to reach a 30 days more range in order to keep having the army forces and the navy forces in the strait in a pure conflict against Iran. The Republicans are just taking a position in the legality, in the way that the Constitution says that is the Congress who, which has the one who's has to declare war, and the president can't exceed that 60 days plus the 30 another days term in order to get into a conflict, no matter if that conflict is illegal or is not. But Republicans are not happy with these circumstances, and they are looking for this legality in order to most rejection to the president's plan. But the two different polls have said recently that 55% of the Americans reject what's going on in Iran, against Iran, and the 32% is in favor. And the other, and on another poll, 64% of the Americans are saying that Donald Trump is not leading this conflict in a proper way, against a 36% who think that probably he's doing a good job.
And turning to Israel, why is Benjamin Netanyahu now considering a ceasefire in Lebanon? Is this shift driven more by military realities or U.S. diplomatic pressure?
I think it's tricky. I think Bibi Netanyahu wants some sort of security perimeter in the south of Iran, which means a security perimeter in the north of Israel. And Bibi Netanyahu knows that the only one that he is going to talk to about this thing is going to be the government of Lebanon. But the problem is not the government of Lebanon. The problem is Hezbollah, and the problem is Iran. So I say this is tricky because if Iran is going to be against this truce or against this pact or against this arrangement or whatever the word they're going to use for describing it. If Iran is against that, Iran is supporting is another proof, another feasibility that Iran is supporting Hezbollah, while Israel is trying to negotiate a truce with the legitimate Lebanese government. So I think that Bibi Netanyahu wants to reach a deal with the government, but knowing perfectly that that arrangement, that agreement are not going to be backed by Hezbollah either Iran. So that's the reason why I think it's tricky. I can talk with the government, but I know the terrorist group Hezbollah is not going to be pleased with whatever agreement I reach with the government. So that's going to be the excuse for the next attacks, but I think.
So Enrique Casero, thank you very much for talking to A News. We appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me.
After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Welcome back to A News, and now we continue with our key regional stories. Pakistan's top general Asim Munir has arrived in Tehran to mediate renewed Iran-US talks in Islamabad, while the fragile two-week ceasefire between Iran, the United States and Israel is approaching its deadline on April the 21st. Our correspondent Turaj Shiralilo has more from Tehran.
The commander of Pakistan's army, Field Marshal Asim Munir, is visiting Tehran for high-level talks as Islamabad has stepped up mediation efforts to host renewed de-escalation negotiations between Iran and the United States. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who welcomed the Pakistani army chief and was the first high-ranking official to hold a meeting with General Munir on Wednesday, said Tehran and Islamabad shared the commitment to promote peace and stability in the region. Pakistan's top general is scheduled to meet Iranian leaders, including Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, who led Iranian negotiators in Islamabad last Saturday. To follow up the mediation efforts, General Munir will reportedly fly to Washington on Friday to meet with the U.S. officials. The two-week fragile ceasefire between Iran, the U.S. and Israel approaches its deadline next Tuesday. Meantime, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held phone calls with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi and Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi. They discussed the Iran-US talks as well as the ongoing tension in the region following the US blockade of Iranian sovereign ports in the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. In a related development, commander of Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, Major General Ali Abdullahi, issued a stern warning against the continued ban on Iran's vessels, saying Iran will act forcefully to defend its national sovereignty and interests. And in the first ever high-level contact between leaders of Iran and the United Arab Emirates in the wake of the Israeli-US war on Iran since 28th of February, Speaker Ghalibaf held a phone call with the UAE Vice President and Deputy Premier Mansour bin Zayed. They discussed regional developments and ways to de-escalate tensions in the region, according to Iranian media quoting Emirates' state-owned WAM news agency. During the war, Iran targeted the US military bases and interests in the region countries, including the UAE, which were used to attack the Islamic Republic. Turaj Shiralilu from Tehran, Foreign News.
Zangilan is in focus today as it hosts a high-level meeting between Azerbaijan and Russia, bringing renewed attention to the future of bilateral economic cooperation. More from Abu Hayat Jafarova in Zangilan.
The 24th session of the Intergovernmental Commission on Economic Cooperation between Azerbaijan and Russia is taking place in Zangilan on Thursday, co-chaired by Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Averchuk and Azerbaijani Deputy Prime Minister Shahin Mustafayev. Ahead of the meeting, participants toured the village of Aghali, a flagship smart village project, and visited the city of Zangilan, where they were briefed on large-scale reconstruction efforts and the region's long-term development prospects. Today's agenda centers on advancing joint projects, expanding trade and economic ties, and strengthening cooperation in industry and agriculture. The sides will also assess progress made since the previous meeting held in August 2025. The session is expected to inject fresh momentum into bilateral cooperation and accelerate the resolution of key economic priorities. Abu Hayat Jafarova, Ilkin Mehtiyev, Zangilan, A News.
Azerbaijan and Armenia have recorded a rare development in bilateral trade. Baku imported goods from Armenia for the first time in March 2026, valued at around $960, according to Azerbaijan's State Customs Committee. At the same time, Azerbaijan's exports to Armenia reached $5.7 million in the first quarter of the year, including $1.5 million in March alone. Despite the increase, exports to Armenia accounted for just 0.1% of Azerbaijan's total export revenues. Georgia's parliament has approved amendments to the law on grants in an expedited procedure, a move that is already drawing scrutiny from civil society groups and international partners. The changes redefine what qualifies as a foreign grant and introduce new exemptions, raising questions about transparency, political influence, and the future of international funding in the country. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili has more.
The Georgian parliament has adopted amendments to the law on grants with 72 votes in favor in a fast-tracked legislative process. The changes were presented by the chair of the Legal Affairs Committee, Archil Gorduladze, and introduce a revised framework for how foreign funding is classified and regulated. Under the amendments, funds provided by diplomatic missions, consular offices, and international organizations accredited in Georgia will no longer be considered grants if they are linked to political or public interests associated with a foreign government or political party. The legislation also exempts the Georgian Red Cross Society and its funding activities from standard grant regulations. The government says the amendments are intended to improve legal clarity and ensure transparency in financial flows. particularly where foreign funding may be connected to political processes. Officials also argue that the changes are necessary to safeguard national sovereignty and prevent external actors from influencing domestic affairs through financial instruments. However, critics contend that the amendments risk reducing transparency around foreign funding and could be used to limit oversight of politically sensitive financial flows. The law builds on earlier debates in Georgia over foreign-funded organizations, which have intensified in recent years amid broader tensions between the government and Western partners. Previous legislative initiatives in this area have prompted strong reactions from international actors, including European Union officials and Western diplomats who warned that such measures could undermine civil society and democratic institutions. Opposition figures and non-governmental organizations have voiced concern that the new amendments may create loopholes allowing certain politically aligned funding to bypass scrutiny while simultaneously increasing pressure on independent organizations reliant on foreign support. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan told Parliament that many of the country's judicial problems cannot be resolved without adopting a new constitution. During his address, he also mentioned that Armenian citizens are already feeling the economic benefits of peace with Azerbaijan.
A significant part of the problems in the judicial system will not be possible to solve without adopting a new constitution, because otherwise this state of inertia and stagnation will continue. Constitutional changes are needed so that we can set aside these artificial frameworks and properly confront the current situation in the judiciary.
Families of students and a teacher killed in a school shooting in southeastern Turkey waited outside a hospital morgue on Thursday. The coffins were carried out of the morgue as families wept for their relatives. The funerals were scheduled to take place later in the day. 10 people were killed in an attack on a school in the city of Kahramanmaraş. An 11-year-old boy, Yusuf Tariq Gül, who had previously been injured, has died in hospital. The shooter, a 14-year-old, committed suicide. The attacker used 5 pistols that belonged to his police officer father in the attack, and the court jailed the father pending trial. The Kahramanmaraş prosecutor's office said in a separate statement on Thursday. Uzbekistan's Center of Islamic Civilization has been officially recognized as the world's largest museum dedicated to the Islamic heritage, marking a major milestone in the country's cultural development.
The Center of Islamic Civilization in Uzbekistan has been awarded a Guinness World Records title as the largest museum dedicated to Islamic civilization, following a formal verification process. The recognition was confirmed by adjudicator Şeyda Subaşı Demirci, who highlighted the uniqueness and cultural value of each exhibit. The complex was initiated in 2017 under the leadership of Shavkat Mirziyoyev and completed in March 2026. Designed as a scientific, educational and cultural hub, it combines historical artifacts with modern technologies to present the contributions of Islamic civilization to global development. According to officials, the scale and depth of the project position Uzbekistan as an active participant in global cultural dialogue. Chief architect Abdulkahor Turdiyev noted that the design reflects the country's rich historical legacy, while also aligning with contemporary approach to museum development. The center has quickly become one of the most visited cultural sites in the region, attracting up to 5,000 visitors daily. The center spans 10 hectares within the Hazreti Imam complex, with a total usable area exceeding 42,000 square meters. Among its most valuable exhibits are more than 100 rare manuscripts of the Quran, including the renowned Usman Quran listed in UNESCO's Memory of the World Register. The collection also includes unique artifacts such as a gold pictorial from the Amu Darya treasure, rare manuscripts from the various Islamic dynasties, and historical objects reflecting centuries of scientific, cultural and artistic development across the region. It is Cyril Vajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan A News.
The United Nations says it has continued reaching millions of Afghans with essential support, even as international humanitarian aid to Afghanistan declines. New figures from the United Nations shows funding for basic human needs programs rose for a third straight year in 2025, reaching $1.7 billion US dollars. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
Despite a drop in global humanitarian assistance, the United Nations says it was still able to deliver a vital support across Afghanistan throughout 2025. According to the UN, millions of Afghans received essential services, economic opportunities, and livelihood assistance under its strategic framework for Afghanistan. The organization says more than 34 million people were reached with healthcare. More than 4.6 million children were enrolled in public education with UN support, and around 45,000 long-term jobs were created. But the UN says conditions remain very difficult, with aid cuts, population movements, climate pressures, natural disasters, and operational challenges continuing to affect families and essential services across Afghanistan. This comes amid a broader humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, with nearly half of the population needing aid in 2025 because of food insecurity, weak health services, drought, disaster risks, and pressure from returning populations. UNICEF has also warned that in 2026, an estimated 21.9 million people, including 11.6 million children, will still require humanitarian assistance. The UN says communities across Afghanistan have shown resilience, working with aid agencies and partners, not only to meet urgent needs, but also to build a longer-term recovery and self-reliance. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Armenia's pre-election situation and the peace process with Azerbaijan. See you shortly. Welcome back to A News. Armenia's pre-election climate is heating up as Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan warns the opposition is pushing the country toward war rhetoric, while he doubles down on peace with Azerbaijan. After the 2025 Washington-backed breakthrough, Yerevan now frames stability, regional connectivity, and a trip corridor as central to its future, even as political divisions deepen ahead of elections. To unpack these developments, I'm joined by Ulviya Zulfikar, political analyst who speaks to us from Baku, Azerbaijan. Ulviya, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Ulviya, how serious are Prime Minister Pashinyan's warnings about the opposition leading Armenia toward renewed conflict? Is this rhetoric primarily campaign strategy, or does it reflect genuine security concerns?
Yes, Armenia is entering one of the most decisive electoral moments in its modern political history, and what we are now witnessing is not just a standard pre-election campaign. It's in fact a deep struggle over the country's future direction politically, strategically, and even psychologically. So Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's recent warning that the opposition is dragging Armenia into a destructive adventure should be understood exactly in this context. So this election is about redefining Armenia's future, and Pashinyan is attempting to shift their radical mindset from resistance and confrontation toward normalization and state consolidation. And his message is clear: Armenia cannot afford another cycle of escalation, which came from its occupation policy, and especially after the Second Karabakh War. And therefore, he presents the peace process with Azerbaijan as a strategic necessity for development, which as it is. And we all know that Azerbaijan restored its territorial integrity and sovereignty and created new reality in the region, which leads to prosperity and development. So even if there would be changes in Armenian government, a radical mindset would be against Armenia itself. And at the same time, Pashinyan openly states that Armenia's future has become more predictable precisely because of the normalization track with Azerbaijan. And peace means opening borders, restoring transport routes, reducing isolation, and attracting economic opportunities. And in other words, he is asking voters to choose pragmatism and stability over radicalism.
Ulviya, how is the opposition framing Karabakh and territorial issues ahead of elections?
Yes, and figures like Robert Kacharyan and other radicalists still hold on to old radical ideas such as invading, occupying other countries' territories. We all know there are myths like Great Armenia, which drained Armenia into instability, and how they were in deep darkness during this occupation period. And the involvement of the Armenian Apostolic Church also emerged in new opposition figures like to business and traditional structures have increased the intensity of the campaign. But I believe that people who live in Armenia itself, I don't mean lobby, I don't mean Armenian radicalists, people who live in Armenia itself, they already see how the peace process appear, and they see that there can be no loss in their family, they can live in prosperity, so they don't believe to Armenian billionaires who were on the side of Kacharyan, Sargsyan, and who dragged them into poverty. And till today, during this pre-election campaign, they couldn't form any other candidate which could opposite Pashinyan, neither Apostolic Church nor these billionaires, whoever. So we all know that Apostolic Church also wasn't into religion issues. There were armed arsenal in their church, and they were more involved to policy and military issues rather than religion things. So the peace agreement with Azerbaijan is therefore not just a foreign policy issue right now for Armenia, and it's the central axis of the entire election. And I think that the radicalists who still hold on these old ideas, they will fail.
Ilvia, in your view, how solid is the August 2025 peace framework between Armenia and Azerbaijan? And are we close to a fully signed and ratified peace treaty between Yerevan and Baku?
So Pashinyan is still in power, and he has this card in his hand about the peace process and prosperity of Armenia. I think if he will be re-elected, which seems like he will be re-elected, the peace process will be more closer. Because these export-import issues, these other military issues, the visits, mutual visits between two countries, and they all show that the road narrowing to peace, I think actually the trip corridor, which we call it Zangezur corridor, all the transport routes, they are all showing that we can be close to peace deal. It was initialed, we all know the no-cause in Washington, but right now we can sign it, and if there will be changes to the constitution after the election process, they can quite be close to peace deal, yes.
So is Armenian society broadly supportive of Pashinyan's peace agenda?
I think right now, as I mentioned before, yes, the people right now who live in Armenia, they were feeling it on their skin. They were feeling war on their skin. Lobbies who live abroad don't live Armenia. They just absorbing the situation. They gain money from this, aggressive and radical ideas like Great Armenia, occupation, war, etc. But people who live in Armenia, I think they are more close to peace agenda, and they are likely supporting Pashinyan rather than opposing him, because on his social media we see that there are more positive reactions to Pashinyan's status, to his videos, photos, etc. And I think that not only on social media, there are reports from Armenia, from Yerevan, and from other regions of Armenia. We see that they say that it's good. We are close to prosperity. Of course, people, ordinary people, they want to live in prosperity. They don't want their relatives, their sons, their daughters to die. That's why I think right now in Armenia, Armenian people themselves are likely supporting Pashinyan rather than opposing him.
Ilvia Zulfikar, thank you very much for your valuable insights on this critical moment for Armenia and the wider region. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates.